So if you're watching this, it's probably not your best day. And I just want you to know that there are two ways to look at this, as there always are. And that is, you can see this as proof that you can't do it. You can look at it and refuse to break it down into the components, the warning signs, and the stress and the triggers and the cues and the behaviors of the past that have cropped back in. Or you can accept that this is hard and you can do hard things. That's really your choice. And so there doesn't have to be, there shouldn't be any shame or judgment for yourself. You know, if you are watching this and yesterday, last night, or even currently, you've somehow found yourself with a drink in your hand, just know that you can use this for growth. Um, we've done so many things in the program, but that doesn't mean that doing all the things is going to protect you. Now, I will say that it's time to get real. And if you've had a lapse or a relapse or whatever you want to call it, you've had a drink, then it's time for you to get real about what you're actually putting into your recovery. Chances are you need to do more. You need to create more time and space. You need to spend more time in the modules. You need to potentially get out and go to some meetings, whether that be in the community or online. I host a meeting with She Recovers. I also host a meeting with the SRC. I'm putting links below. But, one of the first things you can do when you're pulling yourself back up is to get support, be around other people that understand what you're going through. Be honest, tell on yourself, if you will, communicate where you're struggling, and just allow this moment to be painful, because it is painful. And if you don't allow it to be painful, then and reach for new coping mechanisms that may be less familiar, less comfortable, less effective than reaching for a drink, then you're going to find yourself back here again and again and again. So if you're here, just understand that you can learn from this and there's no shame, and that you need to sit with this pain. You need to allow it to hurt, and you need to use it as a cue that you need to dig in and do more work. Um, a lot of times, well, all the time, once you have hindsight, the benefit of hindsight, that's where this could really exponentially jumpstart or throw you forward into recovery, because right now you're operating on the benefit of hindsight. All of the thoughts that we've used to complete our exercises about when we were drinking before, we've never had. When we were drinking, we didn't have a sober mindset, so our perceptions and our perspectives were skewed. So you can look at this situation with a sober mindset and a hangover at the same time. That can be done because you have made a lot of changes and a lot of progress. So in summary, I wouldn't wish this on anybody, but this can actually be a very powerful experience that ultimately reinforces your motivation to change, reinforces your will and your strength and your confidence that not drinking is the right thing. Because if drinking was fun and rewarding, then you wouldn't be miserable. You wouldn't be watching this video. So just allow it to suck, embrace the suck, and stay with me for that. And also, don't overthink this. There are times when in hindsight, you can see that there was a buildup. There were signs, there were red flags, all the relapse prevention strategies that we've gone through. Maybe you didn't pay close enough attention. We'll go back through the relapse prevention module and really dig into those assignments about cues and triggers in your environment, coping strategies, red flags for relapse, having support people on your team. And it's also possible that the slip you've experienced is literally just a thoughtless, mindless oops, and you don't have to overthink it. So in this moment, what do you really need? Do you just need to pick up and move on? Or do you need to sit down and do some navel gazing and do some digging in? Only you can answer that question. But there doesn't always have to be a deeper meaning, or an underlying motivator. For sure, this is not a sign that there's something fundamentally flawed about you. As we talked about with habits, while drinking is an addiction, it's also a habit. And so you can find yourself, without too much, it's just not that far of a distance between here and a lapse or a relapse, as you're seeing. So take the time to decide what this is and what this means, but don't find the need to overthink it. If it truly just was a stupid situation, you made a bad choice, then just move on. Um, just simply look at it, because you don't want to be here next week. You don't want to be here in a month or a year. So, spend a little extra time looking at the 360 view before you move on. But just have compassion for yourself and focus first on all the positive changes you've made and everything you've learned and everything you've already gained from sobriety. Focus on what you have, and look at it as something you want to protect, as opposed to focusing on how stupid this is and I am and you are and life is and the. You got to stay focused on the positive, and that takes a lot of mental energy. Remember that optical illusion where you have the old woman, the hag, she's ugly, and then the young woman. Both of those always exist. And so in this moment, you have to shift your mind to how this lapse or relapse could be the very best thing that ever happened to your sobriety. And if you see it, you see the beauty in it, then you're going to be able to move forward. If you just keep focusing back on the hag, then you're not going to get very far, or you're going to be stuck in the same place and you're going to be stagnant and just going around and around the mountain of regret and fear and shame. And that's no fun. So, a couple of things. I've got a little handout below this video, but to really wrap your mind around what happened and how you ended up making a bad decision, I want you to ask yourself some questions like, when did the urge first appear? And I talk about in the relapse prevention, when you experience an urge, to pull it out of the subconscious and name it. So, was it in your subconscious? Did it just suddenly appear and it was an impulse that you just didn't get ahead of? Or were there signs? Where were you? Who were you with? What were you doing? What were the people around you doing? What was your mood like earlier in the day? What was your mood like earlier in the week? What other stresses in your life could have reduced your ability to handle the stress of that moment? And your circuits just blew, or your bucket of bullshit that you can handle just overflowed. So looking at what kind of self-care practices you had or had not been doing to make sure that you're prepared for any given moment. um, did you stop and put any space in? Did you think about any coping mechanisms or strategies to manage the urge or craving when it came up? And if you didn't, and it's just this blind subconscious, sometimes that's almost scarier, because you're like, I don't even know. But that's where, in addition to really thinking about this, completing the exercise below, you have to, if you haven't already, text me, call me, and we need to get on the phone about this, because it's okay. You just can't do this alone, and you don't need to. And the more you get all the crazy thoughts and fears out of your head, coming out your mouth and into the universe, the less scarier they are. It's the equivalent of thinking there's a monster under your bed and getting your flashlight and shining it, and it's just a bunch of crap under your bed. Well, that's what this is too. And if you can let me help you, or whoever else you choose, then we'll get the flashlight, we'll look at the things, we'll pull out each thing, and we'll deal with them. This is possible to overcome. You're not the first person who ended up at the wrong end of a bad decision. You're not the first person to struggle in sobriety. Most people have some sort of lapse or relapse. It's universal. It's part of the story. This is part of your story now. So use it to your advantage. Use it to reinforce what you're learning. And don't overthink it and don't underthink it, because you just want to make sure that you're doing okay. So make an appointment with me if you haven't. Download the worksheet and do some journaling, and welcome to a new fresh start today. It's going to be okay.